So my company basically built a Slack bot last year using the both incoming and outgoing webhooks as a way to secure our environment and make sure that nothing from the Slack side could get into our environment. With the new setup where you're using WebSockets, is there any sort of security concerns that you should be like wary of? Like it seems like a much better setup where I make the outgoing connection to Slack. But is there anything else I need to consider?
So bot users are considerably more secure than outbound webhooks, actually. Indeed, I would strongly encourage you to make the jump because the way outbound webhooks work is you specify basically a match for the beginning of a message, and regardless of its source, you get it. And that's terrible. With bot users, again, they have to be invited into a channel before they can see anything. And so you have very concrete knowledge of which channels that bot is in, and you have control over which channels that bot has been invited to. So in fact, I would say bot users are more secure than outbound webhooks for building this sort of thing.
All right, cool, thank you.
My pleasure. Going once.
So I was excited to see you're excited about the OAuth sort of identification process, but I'm having an issue in a sense. I have too many cool Slacks that I'm a part of, and within my community we're calling it Slack overflow, and so I'd like to have I'd like to have sort of a meta identity at some point, and I'm curious if your team's already thinking through about some of those processes and how that can scale towards these OAuth principles. Yeah.
Slack overflow. That is brilliant. Wow. We're thinking about it. Unfortunately, that's as much as I can say. We know that this is an issue. We know that many of our users, although not all of them, would like to be able to link their accounts and say, me on this team, me on this team. That's me. It's me. Some people, of course, don't want that, right? And there's a good reason for it. Like, they don't want to say these two people are the same. And so we're at the earliest stages of thinking about these things, but it is something that's on our mind. This is, in some sense, one of the biggest issues that we're thinking about internally is how to bridge users across teams, because Slack is built fundamentally on the notion that users on teams are independent silos that are just, you're on a team here, you're on a team there, these are different people. We never foresaw the explosion of like community Slacks, for example, that have sprung up. So we're thinking about it.
Is there kind of bouncing off the bots idea? So then, kind of bouncing off the bots idea, could I potentially like write a bot that could allow me to invite myself to specific channels on multiple, and then create an interface for me to post cross domains, for example?
Your bot would have to have admin permissions on each team that it wanted to invite you on, and then it would need to be invited to each channel that it wanted you to join.
Yeah. So
by someone else.
Quite a bit of setup before then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, good to know.
But maybe you could. Can a bot invite a bot?
No. We are at Slack. We actively oppose Skynet to the best of our ability. Unfortunately, Skynet is irresistible and inevitable, but we do what we can. Yeah, I don't think bots actually, more seriously. Is there an API endpoint for inviting users? I don't think there is actually. Is the fundamental limitation of that sort of thing. Yeah, so I think that's one of the few. So I was very tempted to answer your question with, well, anything is possible. But I think inviting users onto a team is one of those things that is not possible from our API, actually. Precisely because we want administrative oversight over these sorts of actions. You.
Do you have some great inside story of how you chose the name Slack?
Do we have some great inside story as to how we chose to name Slack? I was told the story, but I forgot it.
It stands for something.
No, it was a backronym.
Oh, backronym. Okay.
Yeah. No.
Well, what does it acronym stand for?
It's not very memorable.
No. Slack likes to ask community questions with a K. Yeah, I'm blanking. I'm sorry.
Message buttons? Can you talk a little bit about what this means?
Message buttons. Message buttons. You want to go?
Message buttons are really exciting. You will need an app to set them up, and then you'll need a way to configure them, the specific actions that they take. But they're really fun. We use them internally with Lunch Train, which is an app that you can get. People can board the train or disembark, and then it DMs everyone when it's time to leave for lunch. So we also have a boba train using the same app for when it's time to go get share tea. Yeah.
I did not know this.
But you can imagine taking the demo that I showed you for GitHub maybe a step further by making an app and then using message buttons. Maybe it's something like your continuous integration flow, where you get a notification that you need to approve a pull request, and you might be able to inspect it or do something and then approve or merge with buttons in channel. Or maybe you're on duty for PagerDuty, and you get some notifications and you can kind of at a glance triage, not important, not important, not important, I'm on it, or call it when you want to handle the issue. But I didn't talk about how technically to set it up. There's a visual interface for it online.
Message builder. So I've actually not built an app with buttons myself, so I can't speak to the technical aspects of it aside from vague generalities. It is true that the message builder app that Brenda demoed, you can, if you have, or if you're looking at the buttons documentation on api.slack.com, you can build messages with buttons in message builder and preview how they're going to look. And then after that, it's a matter of setting up the webhooks to receive the event notifications. We're very excited about them. Actually, because it opens up a very wide new area of interactivity. This sounds really weird to say buttons. Who knew as a user interface element that these would be so powerful? Like, obviously, we figured this out something like 25 years ago, 30 years ago. But as an element of a conversational UX, it's actually surprisingly interesting, and we encourage you to experiment with them, because if you can click on one button and save, 15 keystrokes typing in a command, it goes a really long way. So that's why we're excited about them.
Can you talk about anything else that's like in the current roadmap, like other ways to embed UI like within Slack, like buttons, but the next?
So the question is about our roadmap and if we have anything expanding upon message buttons coming up. We have a roadmap. I didn't talk about it in my talk, but if you could pull it up, that would be awesome. So on the platform team, we have a public roadmap. We want to share with you what we're working on, in part because it would be terrible, given all the awesome things I said about the positive feedback loop, if we Sherlocked any of our developers, right? That would suck. So we want to be open about it for that reason, but also because we have lots of exciting things coming forward. Hey, there it is. You will note there's nothing on the roadmap about further addition to user buttons, precisely because we haven't roadmapped it yet. We've been thinking about it, we've been talking about it. The goal at this point is to see what people do with what we've put out there, basically the minimum viable product for message buttons. They're just buttons. And then depending on how things go from there over the next several months, we'll begin to think about like a concrete roadmap for how we can evolve these things to make them more powerful, more usable in a way that makes sense for everybody who's involved. So that's not on the roadmap, but we have lots of other things, which you're welcome to peruse. So these are Trello cards. They look awfully terse, click on them, there's more behind the card for you to look at. That gives a little description about what we're doing and a little more about the time frame. And the labels are very important as well because it shows how we're thinking about how these different features slot into the different aspects of the platform.
Is there any widget, Slack widget that we can embed in some of the websites?
A Slack widget? So I think the question is there a Slack widget you can embed into a website?
For chatting or for installation?
Chatting.
No. Although I'd be happy to talk to you a little more afterwards about what you're thinking about. Perhaps there's some other way to achieve the goal you have in mind.
What I loved about when I first switched from Slack to HipChat was that how much better you guys allow formatting of your messages. What are the roadblocks to having users have more access to true CSS formatting?
Well, one thing that we're always looking out for is security issues, for example, cross-site scripting. So we do have to kind of pick and choose what we decide to escape or allow or how we represent white space. We have to pay attention to what characters people are already using. Which came up when we added strike through because we didn't want to use a character that could mean something else. And so you'll notice our markdown in the client is a little bit different than what you might have used in other places.
Which is why we call it Merton. I'm not joking.
I see. Let's have you go first and then you.
Kind of an open-ended question, just because most of the Slacks that I'm a part of are community Slacks. I was surprised that you said you didn't see that coming, that people would start making little chat rooms all over the place for different things. If you had any thoughts about that or problems you encountered because of it?
Well, okay, so the basic gist of it is Slack is a tool built for business communication for teams. And this is what we do really well, and this is what our laser focus is on. We are absolutely focused on building the best possible platform for business communication. I say we didn't see it coming. Maybe we did. That may have been premature. That may have been a bit before my time. But the fact remains, what we've designed in a way that's optimized for, again, this goal of business communication for teams. And this is what we're going to continue to focus on. So although there is a tremendous amount of Slack usage outside of these core use cases, these core use cases are where we continue to focus our effort. And so we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled to see these communities spring up around Slack teams. They are not our core use case that we're focusing on. We're focused on the business use cases because that's what we're really good at. We understand this really well, and of course it makes us money. We're not going to lie about that. I mean, that's where the money is, right? So that said, it's highly unlikely that we're going to do much to accommodate this, even though we acknowledge that, it's huge. It really is huge. There are a lot of users on these community teams, probably more than you realize. Where do I want to go with this exactly? Insofar as our business goals are aligned between focusing on business communication and things that happen to help these community teams, then you'll see features evolve to support these sort of things. But otherwise, unfortunately, we're not going to build out features by and large that are meant specifically for these kinds of community teams, with some possible caveats, which we can talk about later.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, is that helpful? Yeah. It's sad, but...
No, it is, but it's expected, yeah.
Yes, there's... Oh, yep.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, and it's kind of a softball question, so sorry, everyone else, but are there any apps or usages of Slack that have really, surprised or delighted you? Like something, like a really interesting way to use Slack that you hadn't thought of? Maybe it wasn't a softball question.
I'm a cynic and a pessimist. Surprise and delight come rarely to me, I will admit. So this is not a deficiency on the part of our developers so much as a reflection on my personality. I have to think for a moment.
Well, I think one thing that is exciting and scary for us is how big the teams are becoming. So at Slack, we have 500 plus
Which is huge for
employees. But you got to think of companies who have, and we know that one of the problems that users face is information overload. So if you can think about our experience every day and then take that and put it in a company of 10, 20, 30,000 people and what that must be like, I think it's kind of hard to wrap your head around just what the user experience is going to be like in terms of searchability, discoverability, being able to connect with your coworkers, but then also all the technical implications of scaling the product that big.
I thought of one.
Okay.
It's not an app. It's a custom integration. It's the New York Times. And they published an article about the way that they use Slack as a part of their publication workflow, in particular with respect to the live blogging that they did for the Republican debates. And it's amazing what they have done. So they have turned Slack into a live blogging platform. I won't go into the details because I'm probably going to get some of them wrong, but I encourage you to look this up. It delighted me. The way that they have transformed Slack from, well, they didn't transform it from, but they turned the live blogging process into basically a group chat, which it kind of is, right? If you think about it, hey, should I say this? Yeah, I think you should put that up, but first change these sorts of things, and then you can put that up there. Okay, that's done. All right, put it up. Right? They turned that process into, or they codified it in a Slack custom integration. It's beautiful.
Very cool. Thank you.
One thing I really respect about Slack is your fair billing policy. For those that don't know it, can you talk about your fair billing policy and like what makes that Slack special?
Sure, I think I know how it works. You estimate how many seats that you're going to have, and if you underutilize your estimate, you get your money back for what you didn't use. But if you go over, then you get charged the next billing round for that number going forward.
I just think
Is that
that's
right?
awesome. You don't really see that a lot in like subscription-based software. So it's really cool.
Thank you.
I mean, so again, Slack is built for humans, by humans, and we'd like to charge you as humans. If you're not using Slack, we're not going to charge you for it. That's the basic idea.
Yep.
I have a user experience question about the channels. Right now there's just one layer for the channels, but I'm in a project where it's split up into several smaller projects and then several stories in one small project. So I'm wondering if you have planned to do sub channels maybe, like folders and subfolders. So it's easier to find stuff.
We've thought about this. We've thought long and hard about this, actually. And the result of that thinking was that Slack became far too complex, unnecessarily complex. And although it's true that in some sense a hierarchical organization of channels might make sense in certain contexts, we found that the necessary changes to the UX and the UI to achieve that were they were burdensome. And so what we suggest and what we do at Slack is basically to find a way to flatten those hierarchies. So, for example, we have a channel called Team Platform, which is where everybody who works on the Slack platform hangs out. So Brenda and I hang out there together, for example. And then we break that down further. So then there's which team are you on now?
I'm on, there's Team Platform App Experience, there's Team Platform Dev Experience, there's Platform DevRel, there's Business Development.
Which are those are you on?
Oh,
Are you App Experience or Dev Experience?
I'm on loan for Enterprise.
Oh, yeah. we could assume that Brenda has not forsaken us for enterprise, and that she's on, I don't know, Team Dev Experience, right? I, on the other hand, I'm on Team DevRel, right? And so when we have conversations that require the context of the entire platform, we'll go to Team Platform and have that conversation there. In the meantime, the things I'm talking about with my teammates on Team Platform and the conversations that Brenda's having on Team Enterprise something, I'm sorry.
Team Enterprise Tools.
There you go, Team Enterprise Tools, right? There's not going to be a lot of cross-pollination between these teams at that low level, right? So she has those conversations there. I have my conversations there, right? So instead of having a hierarchical organization of channels, we just broken down channels into this very flat hierarchy, but where we have multiple channels that we belong to at each level of the hierarchy. Sorry, I didn't know you were on Loan to Enterprise.
Oh, that's
It's
okay. Do we
heartbreaking.
have time for one more question?
Check as many questions.
Okay, how about you?
Is there any concern from the users for like apps that is listening to conversations, like for unauthorized like a snooping, or like is it possible to like have it on apps
Is
installed by the administrator?
Oh, is it possible for an app to be installed for the purposes of surveillance? Yes, you can, but we try to give you a lot of visibility into all the apps that are installed on your team. At the time that you install them, we give you a lot of information about exactly what scope they're requesting through the OAuth process. After that, you're able to sort in the directory per scope for the different apps that are available, and you are able to remove and disable those apps. When apps get submitted for the app directory, we do a very thorough review of the scopes that they're requesting and why they're requesting them, especially if they ask for very permissive read scopes. Does that answer your question? But there are certain prefs that teams have, especially if they're paid, that have to do with compliance. And so it depends on how your team is set up, but your team might be set up for a certain type of compliance export that the primary owner signed. They signed is it like a waiver or a letter for? There has to be a signed agreement for them to turn that on. So not everyone gets to turn that on.
One more.
Almost the same question. So on my company's private Slack channel, all developers want to know if we ever say on a private message something derogatory about our boss, is he able to view that?
The question was whether your boss is able to see your DMs. That really depends on your team setting. So if you have compliance exports turned on, they will be able to see your DMs, but the primary owner does have to go through a process to even get that turned on.
How do we know that? How do us developers find that out?
That's a
If you're
good
not
question.
an admin, can you see the team prefs?
If you're not, I don't think so. But I tell you what, I can read all of your messages. So I'll those not watching, I'm joking.
I think the approach that I would take is that it is a workplace communication tool, and so when I send emails from my work account, I understand, or even if I make a file or upload something to my Google Drive, I understand that there is a company administrator who's able to take over that account and view everything. So a little bit of discretion when you use the internet, especially if you're using a tool that your team has authorized and paid for. I think that's healthy in any context.
So export is on, you get a message every time you create a DM.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right. You do get notified.
Right. I mean, so compliance exports are for things like Freedom of Information Act requests, right, which will literally dump everything.
So I should just get off my company's Slack channel and create my totally independent one when I want to talk to someone else.
Yes, make a separate team to which your bosses are not a member if you really, really want to.
And access via cell, not Wi-Fi.
Better yet, have the conversation in person, face to face on a Caribbean island somewhere. Right. No, I'm sorry that we don't know exactly what the business rules around this sort of thing are, but I think Brenda's words of wisdom are exactly that.
Healthy dose of skepticism.
because even if we gave you a concrete answer, it might change. Who knows? All right. Well, I think that's what we got. Thank you all so much for your questions.